Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship Your holy name.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming. Let's pray. Please repeat after me. Our Father, thank you for revealing your will here today. Your mercy, your compassion, your desire for reconciliation, restoration, and redemption. As we know, Jesus came not into this world to condemn the world, but to save the world. This presentation reflects why I wrote these two books, called Casino, All That Glitters Is Not Gold, also Eternity's Essentials, Poetic Evangelism. It's a call for freedom and liberation from addictions and toxic emotions. In addition, this presentation will reveal God is a God of order, God's timing is perfect, and how God reveals insight and revelation, and finally, how to honor our mother and fathers. Let's begin the presentation. Anyone know what it means to say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure? Or better to prepare than to repair? Unfortunately, when we come into this world, we don't have a lot to go on. Neither did our parents. How many people believe in a proper order for doing things, a right way or a wrong way for doing things? An example, in the old days, a man would go out and he would work, and then he would save up and he would buy a piece of land, and then he would build a house, and then he would find a wife. These days, we got young kids having kids, we got young dads still living at home or on their own with no job, no money, wanting to have sex, and with sex comes babies. They find themselves all messed up, having no means to support a child, unable to fulfill their responsibilities. They leave their girlfriend and the mother of their child to fend for themselves. And as you can see here, it says in this first cloud, "Hi, could you please tell Johnny his son is crying for daddy, and we have no more food or milk in the house." And here's Johnny's mother's response, "Oh yes, I will let him know. I'm so sorry to hear this." And here's Johnny sitting on the couch, "Hey Mom, can I get $20 from you for some smokes and beer?" Then eventually the courts get involved, and it seems to get even worse. Breakups happen, people get hurt, and things start to snowball down a dark, slippery slope of misery. For years, people have fallen into various addictions to comfort, soothe, and deal with their pain. However, it is just a temporary solution, and these pain escape activities are a counterfeit to what they really need. Okay, I'd like to talk briefly about how I felt as a child when I was young, as a toddler, as a teen, even a young man. I had many unanswered whys, some huge, big questions in my life. And for all those years when I was young, the timing wasn't right. I spoke briefly earlier about one of the points God is going to do in this presentation is revealing the timing of things. And I'm going to share how God revealed that. But first of all, I want to talk about a true story about a little girl. I'll come back and I'll talk about how God healed me from those big whys and those big unanswered questions I think we all have when we're young. The little girl was born in a small city called Brantford, known for hockey hero Wayne Gretzky. At an early age of 2, one day while playing with a ball, the little girl wandered out on the street after the ball. This turned out to be a terrible and tragic and dreadful day for that beautiful little girl, whose beauty still remains. What happened was, as she was trying to retrieve the ball, a Brantford streetcar ran over her left leg. Before the streetcar driver had noticed, she had already been dragged 2 to 3 blocks down the street. Fortunately, they located the little girl's mother just in time to give her blood and save her life. But she had lost her left leg just below the knee. Where was her mother, some might say? Rumors were she was out at a local bar, or there was a babysitter who was distracted by a phone call while watching her, or perhaps the mother was unaware that the little girl had wandered outside. It remains a mystery. Now, this young, crippled girl was growing up with 3 brothers and her mom and dad. By the time she was 6 or 7 years old, she would experience yet another great loss. Her father, whom adored her, to him she was the apple of his eye, his little princess, was commissioned to go to war and fight against the Germans. He would be gone 5 years. She felt lonely without her dad. Eventually he would return. However, after only 5 months, fell ill and died at the age of 48. The little girl had lost her dad. By now, around 10 or 11 years old, she found out that kids at school could be cruel. They called her names, and to counter the name-calling, she would perform puppet shows with her stumped knee. Times were tough during and after the war. Her mother alone now, with 3 boys and a little crippled girl with very special needs. Her mother was forced to do 2 jobs to make ends meet and try to keep the family together. Eventually, the burden became unbearable to the little girl's mom. Overwhelmed with life's pressures, her stress now forcing her hand to make a very hard, regrettable decision. She decided it would be best for her young daughter, to send to live with her aunt in Toronto. This broke her young daughter's heart. Not only had she lost her father, now she felt that her mother was rejecting her. "Why me?" she protested. "Why not one of her brothers?" she cried out. Furthermore, now living in Toronto for a few years, the young girl, 12 or 13, was forced to see things at her aunt's house that no one should be forced to witness. There were various men coming in and out at all hours of the night. Many times they were frequently drunk. There were violence, each time causing more and more resentment and bitterness towards her mother, who had sent her there. Living in Toronto, without a caring mother or father around, her father's little princess was feeling so hurt and alone, fearful, empty, love-starved, receiving nothing, no nurturing towards her hurt, damaged self-esteem. Each day she endured her extreme pain. Her bitterness towards her mother grew. A few years had passed. By then, the young girl had become a young woman. And to deal with her immense pain from being love-starved, she relied on self-medicating herself by going out drinking, to bingos, or work. These were her pain escape activities, where she learned to stuff her stuff, all along wanting and desiring so desperately just to be loved and accepted. Finally, a few years had passed. Now, a young woman, she thought she had met the man of her dreams, who would scoop her up and away from all her pain and addictions in her life and live peacefully forever. I'll come back and finish the story, but before I do, I want to tell you about a little boy. There was a little boy whose mother was a stay-at-home mom and whose father was a trucker and on the road a lot. At 3 years old, like most little boys, they are curious and begin to reach out to discover the father's love. The little boy's father would at times be on the road for weeks, even months. During these times, while the boy's father was gone, the boy wondered where his dad was. There came a time after many frequent road trips had come and gone that the little boy's mother grew lonely as well for the boy's father. It was at these times that the boy's mother began to be very overprotective and desired the little boy's affections constantly. Without knowing how to give his affections to his mother, having not been given, shown, or taught by either his father nor his mother, the little boy began to resent his needy mother's smothering. When his father did arrive home periodically, it was for only a brief short time. Then back on the road he went. This was the norm in this little boy's life for years. He was growing up without any true esteeming affections from either of his parents. Eventually his mother would become tired and lonely herself, waiting for the boy's father to return. She would get babysitters more often and began having affairs and acting single like her friends. Seemed as if even though the little boy had parents, he was growing up feeling very much like an orphan. The boy was growing up without the love and support, self-esteem building in his life he so desperately wanted and needed. Eventually his father would leave his trucking job for a new job in the construction trade. His father, when the boy was a teen, would hire him to work with his construction company. His father was a very hard man to work for, and it seemed the teen could never do anything right or good enough. Even when he did good, there never would be any praise. By the time he was 16, his father had fired him off and back on the job 14 times. Soon there would be a big falling out as the boy, now a teen, tired of years of neglect and abuse, one night, in a fit of rage, beat his father violently. Another time, while out with his friends drinking, one of his friends who knew how to get under his skin asked him, "What would you do if your mother walked in here right now?" The young teens abusively replied, and resentfully, "I'd give her a couple dollars and send her back on the bus she came in on." This young man, who was extremely hurt and wounded throughout his young life by those who he thought, like the little girl thought, was supposed to love and protect them, he had become a very bitter young man. To soothe and comfort his pain, he would go out drinking, get drunk, find shallow relationships with women, gamble, do anything to escape the gnawing pain he felt so deeply and carried around throughout his life. Finally, a few years had passed. He met a beautiful woman who found him attractive and thought he dressed rather handsomely. They would go on to have 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl. However, his pain and addictions that for years had temporarily only bandaged his pain beckoned him like a carrot before a horse and led him away to the arms of other women, drinking and gambling, and broke his kid's mother's heart and their hearts as well. Now remember how I told you how I would come back and tell you how I got healed? By the time I was 21, my life was a mess. I had a lot of walls up. I had addictions that were just temporary counterfeits to my pain. I had many fears, including being afraid of myself. How it was suggested to me, because I had fallen into a deep depression, that I go see a social worker, counselor. I stand here so grateful for that social worker, because as he described me when we met, as a man living in a castle who once in a while peeked out, I had so much hurt and pain, addictions. And with this man, for the very first time in my life, I learned to trust someone. I knew he would not hurt me. Some people need only 2, maybe 3 years. I sat at this man's feet for 5 years while he gave me wisdom, knowledge, and helped pull out a lot of arrows from my heart and tore down every wall. In addition, this wise social worker wanted me to take a journey as to what he called the plunge. The plunge was simply to find out anything and everything I could about my parents as children, how they were raised and brought up. To find out, number one, were they given lots of love and acceptance by healthy, esteeming parents who spent time with them? Or number two, were they neglected and abandoned, feeling rejected by their parents, busyness and distance and waywardness, even perhaps verbally and physically abused? So as I took the plunge and their stories revealed themselves, and the plunge was simply like, you've heard of Columbo or Dick Tracy or even Sherlock Holmes. The plunge was simply myself probing into the history of my mother and my father as little children. And as I did that, I would go to my father's house, show up there on Father's Day with a Father's Day card. My knees were having close fellowship because I didn't know if he was going to accept me or reject me. And anyways, I showed up and he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, Dad, it's Father's Day. I got you this card. I just want to honor you today." I'm doing this in the direction from my social worker who told me to do these things. At the time, I really didn't understand why, but I do now. See, he wanted me to reconnect with my father. And as I reconnected with my father, I could sit down. He invited me in the house. We had a ginger ale, and I would show up at Christmas time. I would show up at his birthday. I got to know him. And I would ask questions about what his mom and dad were like and how he was raised. And you see, his answers would reveal themselves as well. You could tell that there was he had a rift between his father. And I mentioned that earlier, how they had a falling out. He also had animosities towards his mother. And so this is how I took the plunge. I also did this with my mother. I took the plunge. I found out everything I could about my mother as a child. I asked her mother. I asked her brothers. I asked anyone who knew my mother what it was like watching her grow up and what she had went through. And by doing that, God gave me insight and revelation. You see, that little girl, that little boy that I mentioned is my mom and dad. Once I could see and receive all the answers of my big whys and the huge questions in my life, only mercy and grace flooded into my soul, and pushing out all the anger and unforgiveness and animosities that I once had. God flooded my soul, and I was enabled to let go and forgive them. Finally, because it wasn't their fault. They didn't know how to love. without God in their lives, they were a train wreck waiting to happen. Finally, it was then I could clearly see how Jesus from the cross said to his Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They only knew a dark, human, Adamic way in responding to life. Neither had been shown, taught, or given the love that they craved and longed for. Therefore, could not give what they didn't have. This is the grace due them. We honor and forgive and give them God's great love and grace. Think about it briefly. How many classes did we take in public school, high school, college on forgiveness? Or how to do it? In fact, there was none. Never. It wasn't talked about. Quite frankly, we learned a lot about the opposite, how to hold a grudge, how to get even, pay back, what goes around comes around, all the wrong ways. Jesus came to show us he was the only better way, a divine way, to finally show us, teach us, and give us his love. Through him we learn forgiveness. When we see an angry person, we see a hurting person, deserving of compassion. We learn to overcome evil with good, even to love our angry, wounded enemies, and to forgive, to be forgiven. Perhaps more teachings like this would prevent a snowball of pain and suffering for this and our next generations. With early interventions and safeguards put in place, could prevent countless senseless killings and help people address their hurts and losses at the most earliest stages. Jesus is the only answer. Through him, we are forgiven and can forgive, living free from addictions and toxic emotions and soaring with the eagles. You know, the devil's ploy is the same ploy that the monkey catcher has. And a monkey catcher simply has one goal in mind. His desire is to go over to Africa and hide in the bushes after he's taken a coconut and drilled a hole in the coconut and put some seeds or some bait inside that coconut. This is what he's hoping for. He says here, I hope that monkey went for my bait in the coconut. I hope he doesn't let go. I like to catch that monkey and sell it to the circus. And here's the monkey. Oh no, it's the monkey catcher. What do I do? I'm so confused, I cannot choose. And all confusion is the inability to choose. So obviously he can't choose and he gets stuck. And here he is. I lost my freedom. I'm so angry, hurt, and sad. Why didn't I just let go? And that's progressing now. He's been a captive now for a while, and he says this, I don't like that monkey catcher. He's got no freedom. And now it's snowballing. He's getting even more angrier. You can see in his face. That's what bitterness looks like. I despise and hate that monkey catcher. And finally, if unaddressed, this is what he looks like. I want to kill that monkey catcher. Now, in more human terms, we'll go to the next slide. And, we might lose a job or a girlfriend or our driver's license or any kind of loss whatsoever. We get angry by that. And so if we haven't learned to address the issue at that early stage, it progresses also to the next level, which is resentment. And it says not dealt with progresses to resentment, And like the monkey catcher, I don't like that person or the monkey catcher. And furthermore, it goes on to bitterness, not dealt with, progresses, and I don't like that person or that monkey catcher. And finally, it goes to this level of rage. Still unaddressed, I want to kill that person or that monkey catcher. These are toxic emotions. Then we read about it in the news, how this person or that person shot another person, stabbed that person so many times. That's called rage, people. And there you have it. You have the full informed picture, the ramifications of our poor, unforgiving choices, and the blessings and freedoms that come from making good, quality, practical, forgiving choices. See, we do have a choice. He had a choice there. Like all of us do, we can learn to do the Father's will. The Father's will is simply His will on earth as it is in heaven, to forgive those who sin against us, so that God would forgive us. We must forgive. We must be known as forgiving Christians. We must let go. And if He did let go, He would look like this. Here He is. Look at me. Free, so happy. Who did that monkey catcher think he was dealing with? A chimp? Hasn't he ever heard of the Planet of the Apes? It was easy to let go of that bait. Besides, my favorite food is grapes. Look at me, I'm so happy, I'm so free. And that's how we can be. We can be free and we can soar like the eagles, or we can let the enemy entrap us, ensnare us with unforgiveness, which just will ruin our lives. I once heard a definition of forgiveness, and it went something like this. It's not my quote. Somebody else said this, and I liked it, and it stuck with me in life. Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. I know that it's not easy to forgive. I know there's people out there that have been so wounded in life, and it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard. All I'm saying, and all God is looking for, is, are you willing to forgive? He says, if you draw close to me, I'll draw close to you. He's just looking for us to be willing to forgive, and God will meet us and help us.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above Him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above Him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way. Sing it now. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above Him there's no other. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above Him there's no other. Jesus is the way. If you have some questions in the corners of your mind, and traces of discouragement and peace you cannot find, reflections of the old past, they seem to face you every